Good evening, Gunners, and welcome once again to another Rip Roaring Reds. You're going to be joining us on a lovely-ish Sunday evening, 24 hours removed from Arsenal's 2-2 draw at the Emirates against Aston Villa, leaving us second in the league and 6 points behind leaders Liverpool. Another podcast on the Rip Roaring Reds roller coaster as we go from the highs of the highs to the lows of the lows. Before we get into all of that, though, Jace, the weekend is almost over. How are you feeling on this fine Sunday evening?
Probably better than you by the sounds of it. Just before we started this, Greg went, "Come on, then let's just get this done with." He's not a happy bunny.
I am not, and I've had, I don't know, time to stew on this, and this result probably stings me more than a loss, which is really, really weird, and not even. What did you say it was, Jason? The worst Man United team in history?
That's what Amarim said, didn't he, in his interview? The worst Man United team.
There you go. Yeah, so even Amarim's worst United side in history cannot bring me out of this slump. But maybe some hopium, copium, and a bit of catharsism can do. So let's go and see where this pod takes us. We're going to do... before I get into all of that, of course, if this is your first time joining us, a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like. Please do give the channel a subscribe. And please do leave a comment down below what you thought of this Arsenal performance, what you thought about Arsenal's 2-2 draw, what you thought about the refereeing, what you thought about everything in between. And we're going to get into that, I'm sure. But let's start, as we mean to go on, as we start every single podcast, with a Rip Roaring review. Going to hand it straight over to you, Jace. Tell me, well, where's your head at?
Where's my head at?
It wasn't Basement Jacks there, by the way.
That's an old school song.
It is.
Right. Tactical nous, efficiency. I feel like the warning signs have been there for the last 4 games that we've played in regards to the fact that we can control the game, we can start well, we can create chances, but the warning signs are always there. And we lacked, currently, we'll talk about the injuries, we lacked any subs. If we're not buying anyone, and it still doesn't feel like we are, then we need to give the kids a go. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Don't just put them on the bench, just sit there for the sake of it and go, oh, experience a live game. Like, no, just play them. Like, what's the worst that can happen? We're already in a bad position, and Sterling coming on is not making any differences. If we've got attacking kids on the bench, then just give them a go. They could turn out to be the next Ranieri or the next Saka. So at the moment, I just feel we're running on, the battery is empty. The players' fatigue is clearly, you saw the last 20 minutes very high, and I think that's impacting things such as the players' concentration. We're conceding every game. Like, this kind of clean sheets we had last year is gone. This team is depleted, and it feels like right now that we're surrendering this season, because if we're not going to do anything about it, and we're not even going to play the kids and try and spark some more energy into it, then this just feels like we're putting up a white flag. And either way, I don't care. I just want to see some action. I just want to see us do something about it. And in my mind, I understand the keeping your powder dry context of wanting to spend the money in the summer, not to best spend it now, but then play the kids. Like, just sitting there, I think you said this yesterday, sitting there and doing the same thing, expecting the same results, is a definition of insanity. And that's what we watched. So yeah, I'm just calling on action. No one's listened to this podcast on Arsenal and is gonna be like, oh.
Well, if Jay said it must be true.
Yeah, exactly. But that's just where I'm at right now. It's infuriating. It's frustrating. I don't want to moan like other Arsenal media outlets you might watch, but I just want to see. I want to see something different from a tactical perspective. Like, try something, because it's getting repetitive.
It's funny, the hopium copium that I mentioned at the start of the podcast, that doesn't seem to be going very well. My Rip Roaring review is probably along very, very similar lines to you. I do think this season is somewhat cursed for us. No matter what we kind of do, no matter how we kind of carve it up, we are destined to kind of be the bridesmaid and not the bride. I genuinely think that your point about are we doing any business? I kind of think if Saliba, and I've read today that it's possibly 2 weeks, if Saliba was out longer term, then I just think we were down tools. I think the season is so broken for us that there's not much value in going all in trying to win it when we know that all the odds and everything is stacked against us. To your point about business, and that's what I'm kind of saying, if we do think that everything is against us, why would we sign someone now? And that's probably the right thing to do. There's probably not much use in going all into a Sesko, a Gyökeres, whoever it might be. It changes every day depending on who you speak to. There's not much point. And that the reason why I kind of say that is because it's now the 19th of January. Saka was injured on the 21st of December. We needed to sign someone when Saka got injured on the 21st of December. Then Jesus got injured as well. And that need to sign an attacking player who is somewhat versatile, that could play across the front three. Someone like, I think we were listening to a podcast yesterday that mentioned Jota. That type of player who can play and is dynamic enough that they can play across those front three. We're in the 19th of January and we haven't done anything. All the talk, all of the rumour mill has not been generated by the club. It has been generated by fans, by media outlets. And let's be honest, we're now out of 2 cup competitions because of it. And we might not have been had we have done something about it. I think our transfer business is too akin to our build-up play. It is slow, it is methodical, it is calculated, but it's not exciting. And, you know, as a fan, going to a ground, and we've been probably like 20 plus times this season, it hasn't been that exciting. And that is a shame, considering the highs of which we've experienced over the past kind of 3 or 4 seasons. In general, my rip and review is the fact is that I actually genuinely think now it's done. The title race is over. And the quote that you had there about keeping powder dry, I'm actually doubling down on now. I don't think using it now is useful. I don't think it's wise. I think it would be a waste. I think if we wait, we could spend our money much more wisely, much better next year in the hope that Man City's rebuild will continue, that Liverpool's downturn on the back of losing both Trent and Salah, and we can set us, and Virgil too, we could set ourselves up for the winning season next season, because genuinely, I think that this season is cursed, and I don't think it's going to be this season.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks you might get players back in time for the knockouts of the Champions League. If we can get a win in the last 2 games, it puts us in the top 8. Then you can have a run at the Champions League. League Cup, again, if we save our battery and we just kind of put tools down in the league, which you have to be careful with because you still want to get top 4 and it's tight in the top 4, right? So you don't want to down tools in the league too much, but you could save a little bit of battery and have a go at St. James's Park in that second leg against Newcastle. The Champions League is still there for taking to an extent, but yeah, the league, I agree. I don't think you have to be really tactical right now. It's really, really clear we have a depleted injury list. So look, just for anyone listening, this is the injury list as I see it right now. Calafiori, Ben White, Saliba. Those are all starting in our team. They are starting in our defence. All 3 of those. Then Tomiyasu. He used to be our backup above Zinchenko. He's still injured. Then when you talk about the front attacking players, you've got Nwaneri. So he was Saka's replacement. We thought he'd be able to cover. He's also the cover for Martin Odegaard. If Martin Odegaard gets injured, he's out. Saka's out. And Jesus out. And Saka's obviously the biggest one of those. The squad is depleted of 4 to 5 of its probably starting lineup. And then you have no one coming off the bench. So we cannot attack all 3 competitions. And so I think the white flag, the surrendering in the league is probably what you're going to see. And it's going to be, can we nurse the top 4 place to get the Champions League next year and then go again? And then maybe we go for one of the cups. I mean, I guess we'd probably go for the Champions League given where we are in the league. But it's going to be so difficult the volume of games doesn't reduce either. I was looking at the fixture list, right? I know we'll have a gap for not being in the FA Cup. Maybe they can get a trip to Dubai, but if you look at the games that we've still got, you're still talking about 2 games a week on average. And so it's going to be so difficult. It's going to be so difficult. So in a way, part of me thinks I think there's a couple, like, isn't there a winger from PSG they were talking about? Maybe you could get a loan in because he's being phased out. But I think we don't want an obligation to buy on the loan. So maybe that's why we've not done it. But I mean, just loan in anyone, just bodies at this point. If we don't trust in the kids, just loan in bodies.
Is it like and let me move, because I'll put the bench, because we wanted to talk about it, and we're probably getting onto that subject a little bit now. The general consensus from my perspective is that what value is there in loaning someone in the same way that we've loaned Raheem Sterling? Raheem Sterling's Prem ready. He's a proven player, and he is, or was, depending on your perspective, a good player as well. I'm not to say that I get your point about bodies. There is an element here of Arteta trusting players. And we're going to get onto that in the Partey discussion, I'm sure. But there's an element here that he just doesn't trust certain players. And he also has a very specific need of certain players. And that if he doesn't meet those criteria, I think we've seen it in the past, he just won't go for them. So whatever options we have in the market have to be of a certain mold, a certain type. And maybe this player, I can't remember the name of him off the top of my head either, if he's the right player.
Is it Mignani? These plays for PSG, they're one of the French strikers. I don't know, I can't remember his full name, to be honest, but I see your point, but at the same time, like, if I look at it right now, we are reliant on Trossard playing well. That's an example, right? Like, he didn't play so good against Spurs, but he managed to get a goal. He played much better against Villa. He didn't really play well against United when he was on the pitch. But he has to turn up every game. And you can't play him every game and expect that consistency in performance. So the bodies are... Mikel has to make some hard decisions, and this is interesting because it could teach us a lot about how he's prepared to grow as a manager as well. Because surely he recognizes that he's gonna, if he puts the same lineup out every game, that he's just running the players into the red zone, and then you seriously, actually, I think, having a big impact on your top 4. Gamble. There's a big question mark on the top 4, right? Man City are back, right? We said this the other week that they're going to be back on their winning way. I know they dropped 2-0 against Brentford to 2-2 the other day, but
they won 6-0 today.
6-0 today. Like, it's that time of the year when their engine turns on. They might not be able to get for the title. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they managed to win the title somehow still anyway, because it just seems to be what they do. But they're going to come back. Forest seem to, they won again. I don't know how they keep winning.
I mean, they played Southampton. Let's be honest. I think everyone could be in Southampton at the moment.
Yeah, Chelsea, like, it's going to be difficult. So
yeah, so I get what you're saying. Bodies might be useful to try and get us at least top 4, because that's the kind of way we're looking at the moment. Mm-hmm. Let me say you tell me what you thought when you saw that bench in that lineup. What was your initial feeling?
Well, we're screwed. Basically, if we rely on the bench and the game's not put to bed in the first half. And to be fair, it was in our hands. All we had to do was lock it down, and we couldn't. So, but I go back to my point I said at the beginning. Anyone you put on the bench, in my opinion, you should be prepared to play. Why not give the kids a go? Like, how do you think Eddie Nketiah and Saka and Ranieri came through in the first place, right? Ranieri came on in their debut against Brentford at 15, away from home, a very difficult game. So what's the harm? Like, I just don't see the point in not giving these kids a go, if I'm honest.
I can kind of understand where you're coming from. The only point I would make is that, again, and this is somewhat naivety and probably failings of Arteta as a manager. He's a young coach, first job into the game. There are elements here that he trusts seniority, he trusts maturity, he trusts age. And that's why a lot of these players make it through. And why it takes a long time. We've talked on this pod in previous years about the ability to trust in the youth and give them the opportunity and the time into it. Like, let's be honest, Myles Better would not be playing in this team if Calafiori was fit before he'd made it in. I think everyone believes now, and we're going to talk about Myles because I didn't think we added it onto our discussion list, but it's worth talking about. I know that he's broken into the team, and I think that he is now the starting left back. But had he have not had that opportunity because of the injuries to Calafiori, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I looked at this bench and was kind of thinking, you looked at Villa's bench, they had Leon Bailey, they had Buendia. I think a player that we actually, apparently we were interested in Duran, apparently we were interested in Buendia. They are players that are good. They would likely make our team or our bench. And they are what you could perceive to be a game changer. And I want to point to a fact that we were walking towards the game. We were keeping an eye on the Liverpool score, which is, frankly, in hindsight, silly behaviour. I genuinely think both of us should maybe have a strong look in the mirror, right, Jace? Or Arsenal fans in general. We keep looking to Liverpool to kind of make slip-ups and then we can't finish our own dinner. It's frankly a bit embarrassing. But my point I want to make is we were looking at them, keeping a close eye on them. It was 0-0 up until the 91st minute. They had bought on £64 million Darwin Núñez. Think what you like about Darwin Núñez. You know, that he has as much of a roller coaster as this podcast may be, his ups and downs. Yeah, he is a £65 million player. He is an out-and-out striker. He can be a game changer and was a game changer. They also brought on Harvey Elliott, who assisted one of Darwin Núñez's goals as well. Ultimately changed the game for them. You look at our bench, we had Neto, Tierney, Zinchenko, Kiwior, Jorginho, and a load of kids. And I'm, like you said, I think Sterling's the only one that I forgot about Sterling because I forgot he was also on the pitch when he came on. It was a bit, there's nothing there that could change. And there was a quote, and I'm sure I mentioned this. We were driving back from the game yesterday, and I mentioned, there was a quote from Arteta about a year ago when we got knocked out of the Champions League by Bayern Munich. And he said, we lack that X factor. That's someone that can come on and change the game. You look at that bench, and there is nothing on there that can change this game. Nothing that could have tipped the balance, tipped the scales in our direction if it wasn't going our way. We were 2-0 up and threw that away in 8 minutes. We had 20 minutes to recover this match. And you're relying on the players on the pitch who, like you rightly said, are knackered, have done like 3 games in 6 days. Of course they're going to be knackered. But that's our own undoing, ultimately. And that this bench, in my opinion, is one of the worst I've seen in a long time.
Well, we thought our bench this year was going to be strong, right? When we need to change, when we did, I think, but we talked about the weakness in attack, and the fact that we still feel we needed to sign one. We clearly didn't get our target, and that's why Sterling came in on loan. I don't think I expected Sterling to be so below par. I didn't expect his ability to have dropped so rapidly from his kind of first 6 months at Chelsea and his seasons at City. But he's just not, from the moments we've seen him on the pitch, he's not there. Like playing against Spurs, against Spence right in front of us on the right wing, and he just didn't have the beating of him. He's lost that yard of pace. I mean, Spence is a big, tall player, really tall, actually. I didn't realize how tall he was. But the fact that, Sterling was too scared to take him on. That's what it looked like to us. He kept passing back to Odegaard. And then when he did try and take him on, which we were happy about, he couldn't beat him. He just didn't have the beating of him. And, he's not with the level that we need right now, in the fans' opinion. So the bench isn't there. I don't know, how do we put this? You can blame the club is not just the manager. The club is not just the players and the manager. The club is made up of a chief operating officer, a director of football, all of these additional roles that have responsibilities, and they need to plan for things that can happen during the season. And what's happened during the season is basically an injury crisis, and they have not provided Arteta with the adequate tools to manage that. They haven't. Because we've basically been relying on Odegaard and Saka pretty much most of the season. They are our Salah and Van Dijk, let's be honest. And so we don't have backups to our players. Like if Salah's injured, you still got Jota, you still got Nunes, you still got Diaz, you still got Gakpo. If Saka's injured, Martinelli and Trossard are not at the same level. If Odegaard's injured, I mean, Saka carried. I don't know how he carried that weight of missing Odegaard, but like we're just
not. The thing with Saliba, you know, when they had Van Dijk out for a small period of time, Konate, I think, came in, and it's like the drop off isn't huge. I get they're not the same player, but our drop offs are the delta is gargantuan in those players.
It is. I mean, Saliba being injured yesterday, right? I think Timber and Gabriel's are absolutely fine centre back, but it's the consequence of what you tactically did it right back as a consequence, which is what I think. You know, that was why we drew the game. And maybe I don't know. Have we got Partey up next? Is that on?
Well, let's do it. Let's do it now then, because it's probably the elephant in the room, I guess. Right, and I've listened to and read a lot about people's opinions on Thomas Partey in his role in this game. Can I let me tell you where my head's at, Jason? I'm interested to see either that if your thinking is along the same lines, if you feel that there's a challenge to it, I'd appreciate it. My kind of view very much is that Partey at right back isn't the problem. Partey not in his position where he has been arguably our best midfielder this season is the problem. And Arteta's persistence to playing him out of his position is just a mystery to me. We talked a little bit about this in the car on the way home. It imbalances the entirety of our system. And I get that if Saliba, if Tomiyasu, if Ben White, if any of those are fit, they'd be starting in a position ahead of him. They weren't. But for me, choosing Jakub Kiwior as the backup centre-back and then leaving Timber on the right and leaving Partey in midfield, for me, that feels the more structured setup, the more natural setup in terms of who should be playing where, i.e. in their natural position. And it then allows other players like Declan Rice to play in his better role. He was sitting much deeper in this game, and that much, you know, he can do that. He's a fine player at doing that. But it just baffles me still that we run this experiment of Thomas Partey as the right back, because it just doesn't seem to click for us. And he's not a right back. And so when he was caught out of position for the second goal, I can't really blame him. I get he's a professional. Really? But I get he's a professional, and I get that he should be following his man, but it's not his natural position. There's not what he's being asked to do normally. And so, you know, sometimes there will be mistakes when you're doing that. I think if Jakub Kiwior is the centre-back and he makes that mistake, then you have a bigger call to blame Jakub Kiwior, because that's his position. That's where he plays. That's what he's supposed to do. This is not what Thomas Partey is supposed to do.
I mean, I agree. So let me play back my thoughts from what you've said. I've never liked Thomas Partey at right back. I don't like him playing there. I think he takes, you know, he leaves a hole in our midfield. He's had a superb season there. Why take him out of that position? In regards to Kiwior, my question, there's a big question mark on Kiwior. What's the point in him still being here? Genuinely, what is the point? Because we knew he's not above Tomiyasu. He's not. I know these players are injured right now, but he's not above Tomiyasu. He's not above Ben White. He's not above Timber, who's been playing wing back most of the season. So what's the point in keeping him if when we do need a centre-back, he's the last choice centre-back and we don't even want to play him? He ain't getting in the game because he ain't playing at left-back. There's Tierney. Tierney's been coming on and playing. Zinchenko's been coming on and playing. So he ain't playing at left-back either. And then we've got Skelly. So what is the point in Kivior? Just sell him back to Italy in this window because there is no point in keeping him. There's clear, the last time I remember him playing, I think he played against Liverpool at the back for us when we had a makeshift back for Liverpool at home. And that was a big game. We trusted him to play. So why not trust him against Villa? So clearly, if Arteta's not seeing something that's good enough to trust him against Villa at home and he played him at Liverpool at home, then he should just go. We should just be selling him. Sell him to Napoli, sell him to Milan. All those clubs have been interested in him consistently. He's just a wasted body and a wasted space. And it's not where we need bodies, ironically. So that's my perspective on Kivior. Because I would have played him and then Partey in the middle and Timber right back. In regards to Partey, I disagree with the goal. I've rewatched it. You're a professional footballer. You're 31 years old. Yes, you're not used. You don't always play right back, but you have played right back before. And there's just there's such a thing as zonal marking, right? There's just whereabouts you're playing on the pitch, and so where you should be marking, or at least staying close to a player within your zone. And he completely let him go. It was nothing to do with what position he was playing. It was just a lack of concentration. That might come down to fatigue, to the fact that all the players' batteries are probably drained from the amount of games they're playing. But if I have to point to someone responsible for that goal, it's Thomas Partey. I don't think the positioning has anything to do with it.
We can agree to disagree, Jace. I do. I'm still unsure, but it's kind of one of those things now where Partey feels a bit like a scapegoat for us. And I have to say this. We threw away a 2-0 lead within 8 minutes. We had 20 minutes to recover and didn't. For all the talk, they did, so we could have lost. You can blame Thomas Partey for the goal, and I can see where you're coming from, 100%. We both have a view that is kind of, you can see either side, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is, it's another game where, and I'm sure we've talked about this previously, where it genuinely feels like the game we're not going to be able to turn it around. The patterns in those games of which we don't look like scoring. And I think the limbs that we saw at the potential winning goal that was then chalked off is incredible. But I think it wasn't against the run of play. But I genuinely think everyone was kind of in stunned, pretty much silence the rest of that 20 minutes, knowing full well the direction that this game was going to take. I don't think we're going to also spend any time talking about the handball. It was a handball, should have been disallowed. Totally agree. Move on.
Yeah.
It's just funny. I've read a lot online that still people arguing against it. It's the first angle shows it hitting an arm. When you see the reverse angle, you see it hit the other arm. It's okay, clear and obvious.
And the annoying thing is they are showing it's so infrequent, or the frequency of consistency by VAR officials and in the ground is in regards to what they show for a decision is really peeing me off. Either show everything or show nothing. Mm-hmm. And personally, I think it's better as fans. We want to see everything because it's ruining our understanding of what's going on in the game. It's not the same experience you get at home on the TV. At the same time, when they do show it, and it's the angle they shown, there was clearly another angle they could have presented to us on the ground, but they showed the angle which basically made it look really subjective. You couldn't tell. In fact, it didn't really look like it hit his hand at all. And we all were furious. And it's only when we were on the tube on the way back and you showed me the other angle, and I was like, okay, fine. But we've talked about ruining the fan experience before, and that's just another example of being shite.
Yeah, I agree with that. Before we get on to maybe more somber discussion, I added this in because we didn't write it down pre-pod to kind of talk about. Let's just quickly talk about Myles Skelly.
Yeah.
Because out of all of the shit show that we probably experienced over the course of January and some of December, Myles Skelly is the one shining beacon of light that is shining through all of the darkness that sits within the Arsenal sphere at the moment. Talk to me a little bit about this game in particular. How did you think Myles Skelly really performed at left back?
I mean, I could speak so many superlatives about him. Is that the right word?
That is the right word, Jay. It's good use. Good use.
I'm stealing from your vocabulary, Greg. Look, he was as consistent as he's been in the last 2-3 games, right? In regards to his strength, his dynamicness, his ability to win the ball in tight spaces, his ability to turn players out, his energy, his enthusiasm, his commitment. The fact that he doesn't look 18 years old, but he's only 18, and the fact that he's cemented this is his own position now, like it's his. Like as far as I'm concerned, if we're not playing him, I want to know why, because he is. It's like when Ashley Cole came in, and I am old enough just about to remember Ashley Cole coming into the side, and it's like that. He is. There is so much promise and potential of how, I mean, just the level he's at now, let alone where he could go. It's scary for oppositions. But the thing that he added to his game was the more creative side, I think, that came out of this game. You know, he was actually creating quite a few opportunities for us. His passing and his eye to thread balls through what looks like an eye of a needle. That was impressive. He started to see a little bit more. Ironically, I was saying it to the person next to me, like, he doesn't really overlap like Timber or White do. And then he started overlapping this game a bit as well, which was great to see. He's just showing a all-rounded game in that position. I think Thomas Tuchel was there at one of the games in the last few days as well. So I'd assume that he's on the England hit list now, because for me, he's the best left back in the country at the moment. Any fan can come at me and disagree, but he is by far the best left back in the country at the moment. Which maybe can't be said for other defenders because we keep conceding, but he is just so good. He's so good. We have to lock him down and give him a new contract straight away. That's one thing I want to see happen in the summer. Yeah,
some Newcastle fans might come at you for Lewis Hall, who's been pretty nifty little left back for them. But I
come at me.
I know where you're coming from, and I there's nothing I can add that would probably add to the kind of checklist that you've just gone through. The eye of the needle pass that he had through to Trossard that eventually was offside, but it was his eyesight, his kind of ability for a pass. I think for me, we all can look back at our youth when we were 18 and the types of things that probably both of us and many listeners might have been doing at 18-year-old. It wasn't turning in the middle of the park, making two men fall over while you take the ball forward and collect it. Like, he is a player that is mature beyond his years. He has cemented, like you say, that position to make it his own when Calafiori is fit. Although I think Calafiori and him will balance it out, because I do think the one thing we need to be cautious of here is protecting his minutes.
Yep.
Because what we don't want to do is have another Saka on our hands where we play him and play him and play him until he can play no more and eventually will get injured. But, you know, whatever we're feeding these players at Colney, keep it up. Whatever cryo chamber or cloning machine we're using to make our next Timber, because that's basically what Myles Lewis-Skelly is. He's just another Timber. And considering how well he's come back from his injury and the type of player that he looks like at the moment, those two together are absolutely our starting left and right back. And so I do think out of the badness that we've got at the moment, he is the one that I look at and kind of go, I just can't wait to see him play again. And I also, it's so funny, you look at our left back options, Zinchenko, Tierney, Calafiori, all of them feel like they have a mistake in them, like they have something that could go wrong in them, a bit of worry, a bit of fear in them. None of that exists yet for Myles Lewis-Skelly, at least for me. I look at him and kind of think he's so assured, he's so strong, he's so protective, he's so positionally and spatially aware. I'm just really looking forward to seeing him play more. And one thing as well is obviously we get to see it quite firsthand in our seats. We get to see him play at left back and run up and down that wing really, really close to us all game. Well, at least for a half. And it's just really good to witness firsthand. And long may it continue.
Yeah, it's the personalities coming out as well. Like, the interview he did with Righty, just the personality against Spurs, like that is a very unexpected thing for me to see against an 18-year-old. He some of the things he had the nerve to do against Spurs as he came off the pitch. It's brilliant, and it bodes well for the future. So yeah, he just excites me.
All right, back to the catharsism, maybe the downturn. Maybe let's talk about this subject, because I know this is something that's quite near and dear to you, and you did mention it a little bit earlier. You mentioned yourself that, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of madness. And that is something that has somewhat sat with both of us as we've discussed these last few games.
Yep.
And it's that Arsenal are possibly becoming somewhat one-dimensional when it comes to our approach to a play. Do you want to dig under the skin of that, Jason? Talk to me a little bit about why you think that.
So the reason I think that most of all is because every game is pretty repetitive in regards to how teams play against us. They sit back and we have to break it down. So there's two walls in front of the goal that we have to break down. And then they almost like they know they're going to get a chance on the counter. And it's like every single time, like something stupid, like 7 times out of 10. Like, I don't feel like I'm exaggerating here. I'm sure someone will pull a stat out and say, yeah, you're talking rubbish. But this is what it feels like. 7 out of 10 chances for the opposition, they're putting them away. Because it's just, counter-attacks. So the goal that Tielemans scored, that was from a counter. The goal that Son scored for Spurs. The goal that Bruno Fernandes scored for United. Like, we aren't giving teams loads of chances, but they're just seeming to take every one. And that is our style of play. That we want to control the game, but we'll slip. And everyone knows we'll slip at some point, and that's their chance. And I just don't understand how every single one of these chances is just going in as well. Like, you think about the amount of chances we create and all the stupid stats we've had on XG, but we're not getting that many goals. So there's something here tactically that just doesn't sit right with me. And I think I said before the game, walking into the game, I think on Saturday, before we'd even got there, I said, I kind of want to see us take more risks. Like we don't press like we used to. We don't counter like we used to. Once we get the ball, we let the opposition regroup before we then take on our attack. We're not maximizing the opportunities that we have.
I don't think we're letting the opposition regroup. I think we're regrouping. I think Arteta has put something so dogmatic in his approach to stabilizing this team that it's like we have to be in a certain game type and game style, and naturally by the time we've done it, our opposition is set up ready for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredibly frustrating in the ground as a fan, wanting to see your team press and go for it, and for us not to, like, I kind of understand, because I think first and foremost, and you can see this in the way in which we've done our signings and we've built our midfield, like we've done, sort out our defense first, sort out the midfield, top up our defense as well. And that's the signings that we've seen over the last few years. The only real attacking signing were Jesus and Havertz, and they didn't work for various reasons, and Trossard. But like a big forward signing, like a real high profile, expensive one, that's not really the type of player we bought. We've built from the foundations up. And that's almost the cautious approach to the football as well. Like, it's not just about the signings, it's also in the way we play. It's in the methodology of how we attack. It's how we set out the game, is to have control, to exercise an element of caution, because above anything else, if they can't score, then we don't lose, basically. So it's protect the back and then work forwards. But the problem is we're not really scoring either. And also we're making mistakes where we're trying to control the game so much that it's almost like you cannot be 90 minutes being switched on consistently, must be so much of a mental toll on all of those players. And therefore, we are bound to make a mistake. An example was Partey against Villa. Not the mistake he made for the goal, but do you remember when he played a bad pass back and Villa almost threw on goal? I think they put it over the bar.
The throw-in? Is that a throw-in?
Yeah. Like, and Gabriel had the slip against, was it slip against United? It was, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Like, these things are going to happen, and we're making ourselves vulnerable. Whereas I feel it's hard to maintain quality and consistency all game. But the cautious build-up approach as well, I don't feel like we're taking enough risks. Maybe I believe that our XG may not be quite as high each game, but I reckon we'd score more goals if we took more risks. We played more on the counter than we do now. Because our XG is so high, it's crazy the amount of goals we're scoring. Well, not.
I looked at while you were talking, I was interested to kind of see, because you said 7 and 10, and it might feel like that. Raya has faced 71 shots and conceded 22, so he's almost conceding 1 in 3. On average, we're conceding at least 1 a game, or just below 1, but basically 1 a game. And you always joke with me, Jace, when you're doing score predictions, that there's always 1. But it feels more apparent this season. Like it's just really funny that your point you made about solidifying our base and solidifying our foundations, and that we have doubled down on a lot. And we're going to talk about injuries in a second. We're conceding far too many goals. We're drawing far too many games. It's not like our defense has been so solidified this season that it's the attack that's the problem. We talked a lot last season about, we went through a string of games where we couldn't score to save our lives, and we were having the same thing. The same conversation that's rearing its head this year happened last year. We couldn't put away our goals, couldn't finish our dinner. But that wasn't too much of a problem because we were being so good in defense. We are not now. And I'm not questioning Raya. I think he's a fantastic keeper. He is absolutely amazing with his feet. I don't think he's to blame for the fact that we're conceding as much as we are. I don't think he's a fantastic shot stopper, or I don't think we've seen enough of it in recent times to be able to call for that being his best attribute. I, like you, am concerned in our approach, like you say. We aren't being, we're so risk averse, and that's to do with the coaching. I genuinely feel that Arteta has coached this team within an inch of its life, and it can only approach a game in one way, and there is only one way in which we do that. There's nothing to change based on our bench, as we discussed earlier. I would like to see us a bit more fluid in our attack, a bit more the press that you mentioned. I think is one of the biggest things that I'd like to see kind of change, because we kind of let teams come at us hoping that we can defend against them. I think we get caught on transition far too often, and although we've bolstered our midfield, I don't think that's good enough. I think that we get transitioned on far too easily. How often do we see other teams just lob a ball over the top and they're in? It happened probably about 4 times during this game against Villa. How often do you see us do that? Never.
Yeah.
Absolutely never. And that might be partly because, like you said, I genuinely believe that the blueprint to beat Arsenal is as clear as day. I think if I was a manager, I could set up a team that would at least give them a go, because I think it's clear as day how to approach beating Arsenal. It is counter, it is transition, and it is getting up at their defense. It's very, very easy. And until we do something to change that, more teams will do it. And the fact of the matter is that teams like Everton defended against us. And they're like being whipping boys, although David Moyes is obviously in sorting them out right now. It's frankly too little too late, and it is very, very frustrating.
Nothing more to add to that. I mean, it's just I'll change a lot, but we can't change anything. So
no. Well, let me end on, because there was a bit that we want to talk about, because there was a whole subject about consistency, and I know we haven't really talked about some of the injuries and stuff for Arsenal, but I wanted to briefly kind of talk about this, and maybe this is my hopium, my copium, my shining beacon at the end of a very dark tunnel. We're currently sitting top of the injury table, and that is obviously having a direct impact on our season. By comparison, Liverpool are 11th, Forest are 16th, and there's only handful of games I think that we've had where we've been able to field a consistent 11 in the games that we've had this season. There was a tweet, and I'll give it some credit in the comments afterwards, that showcased some of the frailties in our starting 11 that we've had. We've had no right back or left back manage to have more than 5 games in a row. We've had 16 changes at number 6 in the last 17 games. We've had no left centre midfield start more than 4 games in a row. And we've had 8 changes at right wing in the last 9 games. Now, a lot of other teams could say teams have injuries. And I know we were listening to Talk Sport on the way home last night, and an Arsenal caller got absolutely lambasted by Rory Jennings, who I don't know who Rory Jennings is or was, but he seemed like a dick. But basically, what they were talking about was that Bournemouth had an enormity of injuries and they somehow beat Newcastle. Now, Newcastle were due a loss. I think that they've been riding a high and they probably are exhausted. And that's partly the reason why Bournemouth probably were able to beat them as much as they did. But I would say that this injury crisis that we're somewhat going through is akin to Liverpool losing Salah and Van Dijk. It's akin to Nottingham Forest losing the likes of Chris Wood, Alanga, Hudson-Odoi. It's akin to Chelsea losing Palmer. It hasn't happened to these teams, and it's happening to us. And I genuinely believe that the injuries that are making us kind of soldier on from game to game is partly the problem where we are. And we feel like we're coming out the back end of that now. You know, we've seen the likes of Ben White. We've seen the likes of Calafiori back in training. We know that Saka is probably going to be joining the team at the tail end of kind of March time, fingers crossed. Is there a chance that these players coming back into our team can drag us back into a title race? Is yet to be seen. But I will have to say that, you know, Arteta hasn't coached these players to miss some of the sitters they've been missing. He hasn't coached them to slip or to allow some of these mistakes creep into their game. It is part and parcel of just the ebb and flow of a footballing season. Do you think, Jace, that due to this lack of consistency in a starting 11 is creating a lack of fluidity in this team and a lack of dynamism in this team? Or do you think I'm looking far too deeply into that?
No, I think you're onto something. I mean, I'm not almost blaming Arteta for some of those changes because some are forced, right? The amount of injuries that have just continued to recur. You find a solution to a problem and that player gets injured and you've got to find another solution to that problem. That's, the right wing changes, for example. Sterling was injured, Ranieri's been injured, Saka's been injured. So that continuous change is no surprise. The defense is another one where we've had different players getting injured all year. So, the only players, and even Marino was unfit, was injured for a large part of the season as well. So that even that left date. So those changes, have they influenced consistency? Yes, I think so. Do I blame Arteta? No, I think some of this is definitely out of his hands. The one thing I will say is, do you remember when we were properly on it in our first season and even to elements last season, and we were just performing well above and beyond what we ever expected us to perform? And Mikel, every lineup, you knew what the lineup was. Like he never used to change it, especially that season 2 seasons ago. He wouldn't change it. He always knew the starting lineup. It was Zinchenko, it was Ben White, it was Gabriel, it was Saliba, it was Ramsdale because we didn't have Raya at that point. The midfield chose itself with Xhaka, with Partey, with Odegaard, and up front it was Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka. Every game, it didn't change until Jesus got injured, and then we had to deal with, I think Eddie led the line really well, but then even then it was pretty consistent. You knew what the lineup was going to be. Those days are gone. I haven't seen that for a long time. And I think that in some elements that's good because we've grown the squad and we can trust more in the squad and we've got more depth, especially in defense. But at the same time, I think, the volume of goals that we're scoring is, it shows for itself that consistency is impacting it.
I always look back. I know it's a while back now, but it's the one that always calls back to me is Leicester City when they, won that league that season. I think that they were one of the first teams ever to basically have the same starting 11 pretty consistently across an entire season. And there is a lot of, money to be put on the fact that if you have a consistent team, you know who's playing, you know how to play together. It is just natural.
Oh,
It's
poor
just
little Liverpool. Poor little Liverpool, No one expected them to win the league. They're so small. They've just been lucky. They've had that consistency.
the little engine that could, Jace.
Yeah.
On that point, because there's one really funny thing that I kind of say, because they talk about the spending power of Man City and Arsenal, and then you see some of the money that they spent on some of the players that they spent it on, and the fact that I already said it earlier, Nunes is on the bench for 65 million. For teams that have a bench player that's worth that kind of money, have no right in pointing a finger at anybody else about spending any type of money. Get back in your box. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
Right. The only other thing I wanted to mention, it's not on a subject, but we haven't really talked a lot about Villa, despite the fact that obviously we played Villa. Well, in my opinion, I don't think they offered very much in this game. They offered the same in which the likes of Tottenham and Man United offered us, which was a route down the middle, which we showed them, and they took. That blueprint to beat us was there for all to be seen. I do think that if we cut out that kind of side of our game, I think we will be unstoppable. I genuinely think if we're able to kind of figure out how to break down that low block and that route one football, then we'd be really, really good. Is there anything that you saw from Villa that you thought they were worth their money for this game? Or do you see the same thing that I do? I think that they were fortunate to get a draw.
I mean, I saw the world's best keeper put it in his net twice. That was great. I love that.
Couldn't happen to a nicer bloke.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know how much I like Ollie Watkins, and he's always a danger. So I wasn't surprised to see him score the equaliser. There were 4 chances that stand out to me. 2 of them were goals. One of them was when they hit the post after they got the first, and then the chance where Partey gave that throw in. So they had 4, you could say, big chances. There might be smaller chances that I don't remember. I mean, I think they were better than the United team and the Tottenham team that came here, but they weren't the hardest team we've played this season. And on a day when we take more of our chances, we win that game easily. So, I mean, they're good, but they're not as good as they were last season. That's Villa in my eyes.
I think I can agree with that. Right. We are playing Zagreb on Wednesday. I will be going to that game. I don't think you are, Jason. But we could be joining you on a podcast, post that game and in games in the future where we're through to the final 16 of the Champions League. We've signed a striker, and all is well in the world of Arsenal. Who bloody knows? But we loved you for having us on this podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. If you made it all the way to here, please do give the video a like. Please do give the channel a subscribe. Please do leave a comment down below what you thought about Aston Villa's putrid performance and 2-2 draw against us. I'm tongue-in-cheeking that, of course. Jace, if they're listening to this with their ears rather than watching with their eyes, what do we want them to do?
Yeah, just subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Feel free to leave us a review. 5 stars, no more. Else Grev gets very sad. Yeah, that's it.
Lovely stuff. And we will see you again next time, hopefully in better circumstances in the Arsenal world. Until then, thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Come on!